We're starting with the Nasdaq 100, and as we zoom in here, I think we get some clear indications of where we're at. We get a push above 14.4, and we get a push above 14.6 throughout the middle of the day with that bull flag breaking us through there. This is also where essentially the Fed speech kind of started. We have a little bit of chop, but ultimately holding above 14.6, the key level, and pushing up. Now, when we go to the S&P, SPY specifically, we get a little bit of a notion here of what's happening. So we go quickly to the 200 SMA on the daily. We get a mount of the 418 level from open, push, mount, pushing back into the 200 SMA. So we have a lot to discuss here when it comes to technicals, but we also need to discuss what's happening with the Fed and everything they said today. Now, when we jump into this, I don't want to jump to any conclusions, and I also want to be accountable for statements that I've said previously. Now, going into today, I was very confident in a pause. I think everyone was. It was like a 99% chance or probability there. But then the reaction to said pause and what the Fed said was all the more different. We're going to go into exactly what Powell said. That was very concerning here momentarily. But when we're looking at this action, I think it's important to understand that you have a plan, you follow that plan, and then you act based on that as well. So going into this week, that's why I was saying, you need to be very patient. No matter how much I like Apple for downside going into earnings, no matter how much I like the NVIDIA setup, at the end of the day, you want to be patient at the very least until FOMC because anything can happen. Looking really quick at the Federal Reserve and the statement here, I'm going to go to a little bit more as well. But before we do that, I ask you to do two things. Consider liking and subscribing. It helps out tons, and I appreciate all the support. The Discord link is also down below if you are interested, but I'm not going to waste any time with anything else along those lines. So when we go really quick back to here, you can see a few things. Now, the biggest things that were mentioned here, the biggest thing was the change in this statement. Now, this whole statement is very similar to what was said previously in September, except this right here. I'm talking the whole exact statement. It's all very, very similar. We covered it today in live. Now, when I zoom into this right here is very interesting. So the banking system is sound and resilient. It's important to also know they still said inflation's high, everything's still an issue, yada, yada, yada. Tighter financial and credit conditions for households and businesses are likely to weigh on economic activity, hiring, and inflation. What they added was this right here, tighter financial conditions. Okay. And this is what is going to hopefully push inflation down. So we're going to jump into that specifically. But I want to address this right now, that the market liked what was said. And ultimately, what I believe the market liked what was said was Powell saying one thing. And it was consistently saying over and over throughout the whole meeting, it's working, it's working, it's working, talking about the Fed's plan. Now, we can disagree all day long if it's actually working, if inflation's still, a major issue. But nevertheless, we can't argue with what's happening with the numbers. The numbers are going up and up and up, and they're looking stronger. So if you rewind to yesterday's video, you'll understand what I said about the housing market and the issues with where rates are. Now, they didn't go into detail about what areas of inflation are still sticky. But what they did say is that, and they added it to the statement, that conditions for financially, as broad as that may be, for consumers and regular people like me and you are going to get tougher. They just bold-faced said it to us. And that's not going to really impact if they start cutting rates. That's going to impact with hopefully getting inflation down further. They're also going to continue to offload as far as reducing their balance sheets. So these are all things necessarily that kind of want to pull the market down. But again, what I said, when you watch that video, when you watch the whole Fed meeting, Powell continued to say, it's working, the public has faith in us, and that's really what pushed us up. Okay? So there is no arguing with that, and it can't be a sore loser in the market. Again, we weren't really focused on trading just yet, but this kind of puts a wrench in the idea of what we were looking for. But tomorrow we do know there's still Apple earnings. And I want to say right now, I don't think necessarily that Apple can tank the whole market or is going to dictate the way everything moves. But we need to go into a little bit more. Now, just so you know, this is all on Twitter, so you can go see everything that I said regarding the Fed decision and everything that was said at the meeting, just so you know. Now, going into today, when we look at fundamentals, or at least the technical side of things, right? You mounted that 418 yesterday, and we pushed into the 200 SMA. Now, I want to be very clear. When I say stuff to you guys, I'm not really I never really go back and forth. I never go wish-wash, right? Even here in Discord today, 8:08 a.m., the market rundown, right? We give the watch list every single day here in Discord over all the stocks we like, and then we also do the rundown, right? And what do I say here? Today's going to be very short and to the point. I will not be trading at the very minimum until after the rate decision at 1 p.m. Central. I showed you the range. I showed you the target levels to the upside because we anticipated upside today, right? The whole idea today was that you would get some upside, but ultimately you would get trapped going into Apple earnings. Now, what I didn't account for was the level upside that we would get from the idea of a pause. From the idea of a pause, we have essentially pushed up from 416 up to 424, almost $8. That is significant. So we have to be able to understand and identify that. And we did so with pretty decent volume on the day, especially near the end of the day. When you go look at that volume, you can refresh it. We can see real quick here, November 1st, 97 million. If you remember during the live stream, I said probably 95 to 100 million. Volume was decent. We go into Qs, we look at what happened here, we look at that volume as well, and I believe Nasdaq was probably going to be better, which it was, almost 60 million volume there as well. Not fantastic, but still decent volume. Okay, so Nasdaq and SPY did very well. Okay, those are things we have to be able to identify. We go into Nasdaq and we look, and again, you see that overall structure that we were kind of forming in the bear flag at that level. You mounted, yes, and basically coming into today this morning, and then we shot up to, not only did we get above 14.6, but we're pushing back into almost 14.8. This is very strong behavior. Okay, very strong. We look at some of the tech names, and we can see that they're moving very well also. Now, you can also see here too, right? We'll get rid of that and we'll actually bring this up. So I do want to show you guys, sometimes I like to have the chart a little bit cleaner to demonstrate. You can actually see Chart Prime does a lot of the work for us as well, showing us all the major levels. So even though I marked out this major level here, Chart Prime already had it marked out for me as well to confirm my thesis as well, going at that level of 14.44. So you can see we get above this yesterday, mount it, and then we push up. Right? So even though I was feeling bearish, we still had some of the indicators that, man, probably need to start looking at the upside here, pushing into these levels, getting that overall momentum and movement that we want. If you're interested in seeing these things and getting more confirmation and seeing the levels that we're using every single day to trade with, the link for Chart Prime is down below, so make sure you check those guys out. But again, so this is what you're seeing here, right? We're seeing decent movement. Even with IWM down here, right? I want to be very clear. So IWM here on the daily, right? We go to the daily chart, we zoom out. You broke those 2022 lows. Possibly, it is a possibility now, right? I'm not sold on being bullish yet, but we're getting dangerously close as we mount above the 200 SMA on SPY, right? So we go back to the 2 hour, we zoom in here, you're pushing back up, right? Beginning of the day, a lot of downside. After the beginning of the day, going to the Fed meeting, you push right back up, you're starting to see strength. These are signs that you want to see. But again, I'm not convinced just yet. I want to make that very clear. Now, when we look at the market as a whole, I think there's a few things that we need to be talking about. One, I do like that tech is bouncing. I do like that. I think tech bouncing is one of the things that you need to see in order to get a strong market, at least in the year of 2022, 2023, and going into 2024, right? The whole, course of this year, the big 7 names in the market, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, I can go on, Tesla, those carried us for a bulk of this, right? Going forward, I don't think things are going to change. Even though we saw Dow moving well the other day, tech still collapsed and the markets kept dropping and found new local lows. So you need to be watching these names. Now, I do believe there's some things that we need to be watching fundamentally as well, as far as the dollar and what's happening with yields and bonds. We saw yields today start to get smashed. We also saw a report that I'm going to go over here in a second that they believe the bottom is currently in for at least these bonds, and that we're going to start seeing kind of inversion start to happen. We're going to start seeing TLT and these other names start to bounce, and this is actually a reputable guy. We'll talk about that in a sec. But those are areas we need to be kind of concerned about, and we need to be vigilant and watching, because those have been the overall areas that have pointed us in the right direction. It's also worth mentioning Powell finally talked about oil. Now, his mention of oil wasn't my favorite. You can literally go back and watch his live meeting and what he said. He's verbatim concerned with what's happening in the Middle East. Right now, oil isn't being affected. It's actually dropping below 82, which we called out on Twitter as well. But he's basically saying there's not too much to say. I hope that this doesn't escalate any further because oil prices will go up. Essentially what was said in that meeting. It was hopes and wishes. There was no actual fact of what's working itself out. If we go to any of the previous other meetings as well, there was a lot more information given to us regarding what was the areas of inflation that were still sticky. Was it housing? Was it food? Was it gas prices? What was the catalyst? If we remember the last meeting, it was what was happening with oil. It was the first time that Powell had mentioned energy or the big problem surrounding energy in over 2 years. right? Even when Ukraine was invaded by Russia and oil prices shot up, Powell still didn't admit or even acknowledge oil. But now he's acknowledging oil in September, and then this month he's like, well, I hope nothing goes wrong in the Middle East because it might go up if this things happen or this escalates. It's kind of weird when we look at the reality of it. It also shows that we just don't know what's working, but we do know that it's working. So shortly after the press conference was done with Powell, bond expert Jeffrey Gundlach came out and basically said that he believes the bottom is in for these bonds, right? Basically that we're done, we're paused, this is the bottom, yields are going to come down, things like TLT and these other ones will start bouncing up, which is a lot of you guys have been asking a lot about these. And I will say this guy has been on the money. Back in 2018, 2019, he called for yields to start pumping and he was a little bit early, granted, but he made a lot of money on this. So he actually has been killing it. But it's important to see that what he said here, consumer price index inflation should fall, but the U.S. economy may see a recession in the early part of 2024. He's actually been calling for a recession for a longer time, but this is basically his viewpoint, what's happening right now. Okay. And he also expects the central bank's dot plot to be less aggressive as long as inflation falls moving forward. But again, I don't think inflation was falling over the past month or two. If we look at the data, and there's a reason they didn't tell us what parts looked good. Okay, we need to understand that. They also mentioned in that meeting that wages are still growing too fast. So again, you hear the tone when I'm talking about this that, it's a little bit frustrating where we're at, but all the market wanted was no bad news. And, sometimes that's just what it is. There's more buyers than sellers out there. They're taking advantage. And, at most times, investors are going to invest when they see any type of opportunity. I'm going to take these off real quick and put this back on up here as well. So we're going back. So again, let's dive back in. So if we can get back above the 200 SMA, I do think you look good. I think you look pretty strong. And I would personally be anticipating a move up to roughly this range here. So almost 429 to about 432. That's my next big range here on SPY. I've been doing a lot of SPY charting just so you guys have probably realized. But yeah, this is my next level come to SPY, 429, 432. If we can hold above. We get above 433, we're really cooking at that point in time. The Nasdaq, I posted about this a little bit earlier as well. Personally, above 14.6, you guys know how I feel. We've been tracking it for the past few days. So when we look at this, I'm going to keep it pretty blunt. If we get above like this 14.85 range, I think we're going back into 15K, 15.1 roughly at that point. To get really bullish, you got to get above and hold above 15.4, the same level mentioned way back here, right? We never got that amount. That's what you want to see to get very, very bullish. Apple earnings are tomorrow, and if we get a good report from Apple, I will be very bullish as well. Again, it's worth mentioning, I don't have an Apple position. If I'm going to short, right, I really, especially after this meeting, I don't want to go short on Apple or anything right now until we get some confirmation. But you want to see that rejection of at least 174, but you're getting above it here in the after hours. Now, anything could change overnight, but as of right now, you are getting above every key level, the 200 SMA and now 174. The last time we went long above 174, we pushed all the way to 182. Go backtrack the data in the videos. Go back here to October 4th and 5th. We talked about it for days. So getting back above 174, if earnings go well, Apple could really start to push also. It's worth mentioning some people were downgrading Apple, I think back to 195 from like 220, but still important to be watching what's happening. I still think they miss, and you should be keeping an eye on it. Now, this is the concern, and this is why I say do not start playing these things prematurely or going, too aggressive in any play, right? Now, with NVIDIA, we bear flagged into, 410 and we dropped down to 392 and you ended up bouncing, right? You had AMD earnings and then QCOM earnings today. If this starts to get back above 429, I mean, you could even argue now, back above 410, you're starting to see people starting to cover positions. I'm going to tell you now, if you start to make a higher high here, right? See how we're making lower highs continually when we push down, right? If you break the trend here, you get above, basically back to 440, this thing could really start to push back up. And it could start pushing back up aggressively, especially with the earnings that we're seeing from semiconductors. AMD, great outlook. And AMD never gives an aggressive outlook. QCOM, solid earnings. Decent outlook, right? QCOM up at 115 in the after hours, up almost 4% roughly. Good day here, pushing back into 200. If this gets back above the 200, you're going to start seeing a really nice push there as well, right? So the more I go over these tech names, and again, Microsoft, another great name, back over 341, right? So all in all, tech did not care. With what was said, they just wanted anything that wasn't terrible, and they kind of got it. And now they're loving it, and you're pushed up. Microsoft breaking trend, trying to get back up as well. I said yesterday above 304, as much as I hated it, it looked good, right? All these levels are the same. So you got to be watching these very, very closely. Okay, make sure you're watching these. Make sure you're keeping them on track. Now, the one thing I will mention, the one trade I'm going to give you an idea about here today is going to be Tesla. Now, Tesla has 2 levels, and I want you to remember this, okay? So I'm going to actually draw this out for you. Okay, you have 2 levels you're really watching. Let me get rid of this. You can actually see where this top level is because Chart Prime is making it really easy for you. And make this clean, okay? You have your 200 SMA right here on the daily. You also have your 200 SMA, and this is arguably more important, right? Right here. This is your weekly 200 moving average at basically 208. This is actually going to move up now like to around 208. Okay? And then you have a median level right here. So there's 3 levels you're watching at 212, roughly right there. Okay? Give or take right in this little region. So this is what's happening. If you get back above this level here, right here, the 200, you look really good. You want to see a mount above that area. That's what you want to see. Now this level here, you've seen some resistance. We've seen rejections here. So I expect turbulence here. I don't think it's going to be just a straight shot. I don't think that's what you're going to get. So make sure you understand that. Right here, you're going to get turbulence. Where you get confirmation of being very bullish on Tesla is back above 218. Okay? I want to make all this very clear. Tomorrow, we do have Apple earnings, so I won't be able to update you guys here on the channel. You're already getting almost above that 200 SMA on the weekly. So this looks like a great day trade going into tomorrow. But again, these are things you need to be watching. And I do think Tesla could be setting up for a great opportunity, right? It doesn't matter. Again, this is the line. If indexes move up, we have to anticipate our stocks start moving up as well. Tesla is heavily shorted. I still think China and these things are issues. However, I am not a fool, and I will not miss an opportunity like this. If you get above 218, the upside opportunity to 240 is massive, 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 massive. Again, though, I'm going to tell you, what I'd be looking at, this is Options AI. This is our new sponsored broker here of the channel. This is where we do everything through now for option drops, right? We're going to see some more collabs with us as well, right? So Tesla, we're going to go to Tesla. We're going to go to bullish trades, what I'd be looking at. And these will change, right? Because again, I want to see these levels broken first. Again, I am not interested in a daily, weekly contract, okay? Now, you could do something a little bit on the more risky side, like November 17th. You could try something like this if you wanted, personally. What I'd be looking for, though, I'm going to tell you right now, I'd be looking for something closer along the lines of in the money, right? So closer to 15 or right out of the money, right? 215, 220. That's where I would be looking for November 17th. That's really aggressive. I'm going to tell you right now, right? That's very, very aggressive. So I want to make sure that's really clear, right? You can go something like the 220 or go up a little bit to the 215 right here. We're going to save that strike. So we'll go back. We'll continue back in. And you can see, right? They're currently at 465. You have about 3 weeks on these contracts. Personally, what I like to just get less and less risk. I want to have as least risk as possible, especially if you're trying to swing anything. And if you're trying to do this, in my opinion, you're going to want to be able to swing so you can have longer on those trades as well. So we're going to do December 15th. Those are the ones that I like the most and the ones that I'll be watching, okay? We're going to go to calls, right? This is the one we like. Right now, they're a little bit more expensive. They're going to be cheaper than this, right? So we're going to go quickly. We're going to go up to 215. These are the ones that I like. And again, by the time you break above 218, you'll be in the money as well, okay? So continue. These are the ones I'm liking. Currently about $1,000, okay? But in my opinion, you could easily start pushing up by mid-November, right, into this median range to start filling that gap. Understand it. The risk is there. I'm going to be updating you a lot on this trade specifically, so stay tuned. Overall, that's what we're looking at right now. I will say continue to keep your head on a swivel. We're looking at Apple earnings. I don't think it goes well, but on the off chance it does, you want to be prepared for that. If Apple doesn't perform, I don't think it's just going to drop for a second. I think it will continue to drop pretty nasty. So those are things you need to be prepared for in this market, right? I think Apple, if it starts having downside, it's going to continue down, right? We could see more downgrades coming out across the board on names like Apple, possibly even Tesla, and something like NVIDIA as well. The only thing with NVIDIA with China is these other companies like AMD and QCommerce reporting such good earnings as well. So you just have to imagine NVIDIA keeps up with them. That's the only thing there. Now, as a broad viewpoint as well, the Discord link, just so you guys know, we're going to be editing that tonight. It's still down below, but it is going to cap out on this weekend. I believe we're only going to be doing 30 total slots between basic and full access, just so you know, and then we'll reopen that come Black Friday. So make sure you guys are taking advantage. Do what you got to do. The Twitter link is down below. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one, traders.